secret that slept for 3,300 years. For more than 3,000 years, something waited beneath the sands of Egypt. No one knew it was there. People walked above it. Kings rose and fell. Empires vanished. But the tomb stayed silent. Behind one sealed door, untouched by time, there was gold. There was death, and there was a mystery, powerful enough to shock the entire world. Then one day, that door was opened, and ancient Egypt came back to life. The story begins in the Valley of the Kings, a lonely, silent place. On the western bank of the Nile River here, the sun slowly disappears behind the desert, and for the ancient Egyptians, that fading light was not just the end of a day. It was a symbol, a passage, a doorway between life and the world beyond death. To them, this valley was more than stone, sand, and silence. It was sacred ground. That is why the pharaohs were buried here, deep beneath the rocks, inside hidden chambers carved into the earth for eternity. By day, the valley burned under the desert sun. The stones held the heat, the air felt heavy, and the silence seemed endless. But when evening came, the heat faded, the wind grew colder, and a strange calm settled over the valley. It was the kind of silence that felt as if it was guarding something old, something forgotten, something hidden for thousands of years. Tutankhamun was only a child, around 9 or 10 years old, when he became king of Egypt, at an age when most children were still learning about the world. He was placed on the throne of one of the greatest empires on earth. To his people, he was not just a ruler. He was the living image of the gods, a bridge between ordinary people and the divine powers they worshipped. But his time on the throne was short, very short. Tutankhamun died when he was only 19 years old, and even today, his death remains surrounded by questions. Why did a king so young die so suddenly? Was it illness? Was it an accident? Or was there something darker behind his death? Some believe he died from disease. Others point to an injury or a sudden accident, and some still wonder whether the young pharaoh became the victim of a political murder. The truth is, we may never know for certain. After his death, his body was prepared for the afterlife for 70 days. Priests carefully worked to preserve him. His body was treated with oils, covered with special salts, and wrapped in layers of linen, because the Egyptians believed that the soul needed to recognize the body in the world beyond death. To them, death was not the final ending. It was the beginning of another journey, and Tutankhamun had to be ready then, with a royal funeral. The young king was carried into the Valley of the Kings, and deep beneath the earth he was placed in his final resting place. His tomb was not massive, it was not grand. Compared to other pharaohs, it was small, almost modest. Tutankhamun had died unexpectedly, so there had been no time to build a great monument for him. But strangely, that became his greatest protection. Over the centuries, sand, floodwaters, and debris slowly covered the entrance. And then the tomb disappeared from the world. Treasure hunters never found it, robbers never reached it, and history almost forgot it existed. For hundreds of years, people walked right above it, never knowing what waited beneath. A forgotten king, a sealed chamber, and one of history's greatest treasures were waiting in darkness. By the early 1900s, many archaeologists believed the Valley of the Kings had no secrets left. The great tombs had been opened, the treasures had been taken, and the mystery, they believed, was over. But Howard Carter did not agree. He believed that somewhere beneath the sand, Tutankhamun's tomb was still waiting. With the support of Lord Carnarvon, Carter searched for years. The work was slow, the results were disappointing, and the excavation was almost abandoned. Then, everything changed. A worker noticed something buried in the sand. At first, it looked small, almost meaningless, but as more sand was cleared away, stone steps appeared. They led downward, into the earth, toward a sealed door. On November 26, 1922, Howard Carter stood before that door. He made a small hole, raised a candle, and looked inside. For a moment, there was only darkness. Then slowly, the candlelight moved across the room. Gold began to shine. Strange shapes appeared in the shadows. Treasures that had slept for 3,000 years were suddenly glowing before him. Lord Carnarvon asked the question everyone was thinking. "Can you see anything?" And Carter answered with words that became history. Yes, wonderful things. When they entered the tomb, they realized it was more than a hidden chamber. It was a palace for the afterlife. Every object had a purpose. Every detail carried meaning. There were golden chariots, royal thrones, jewelry, and sacred objects for the next world. The tomb was filled with wealth, but it was also filled with belief. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not the end. It was a journey. Tutankhamun had been given everything he might need to continue that journey beyond this life, but the most sacred place in the tomb was still waiting. Inside the burial chamber, Carter found golden coffins placed one inside another. Each layer brought him closer to the young king himself. At the very center, there was a magnificent coffin made of solid gold. When it was opened, the world saw one of the most famous faces in history. Tutankhamun's golden mask, made of pure gold, decorated with precious stones and carrying an almost divine expression. It was more than a burial mask. It was more than a treasure. It was the face of ancient Egypt itself, a face that had waited in darkness for more than 3,000 years. The discovery changed everything for the first time. The modern world could see the world of the pharaohs almost untouched. Tutankhamun was not Egypt's most powerful pharaoh. He did not rule for long, and in life, he may not have changed the world, but after death, he became immortal, a forgotten young king, became the symbol of an entire civilization. Today, when the wind moves through the Valley of the Kings, it almost feels as if the past is still whispering. A forgotten tomb, a sealed door, and a secret that slept for 3,300 years. Howard Carter's candle broke the silence, but the mystery of Tutankhamun still lives on.